Well, welcome to this presentation on the Integral Leadership Review, Boundaries, Theories, Practices, and Intersections. The Integral Leadership Review is a unique publication within the domain of leadership studies. It is a publication that spans and/or connects the boundaries of good theory and good practice. It is a publication at work at the intersections of discipline and therefore capable of illuminating opportunities to advance collective transformations and possibilities. This work, this publication, is transdisciplinary in its intentions. Moving within this intention, we also find the opportunities to reveal and develop the potentials of individuals at work in these communities of practice. We will hopefully discover together that our collective work is at the apex of putting wisdom to work in the world. In this presentation, I'm going to try to orientate you to the richness of this intersection of potential. I'm going to largely attempt to locate this intersection between the worlds of good theory and the world of good practice. What the boundaries may be along this upward way have yet to be fully discovered. Perhaps we will learn more about these boundaries together. What is the nature of integral leadership? What does it purpose? Who are we within this purpose? These are interesting questions to consider as we begin the exploration into the nature and reality of integral leadership. Much of the confusion that has been created concerning the nature of leadership is contained within our basic prejudices concerning its meaning. We have allowed the term to take on many meanings and to be synonymous with too many other terms. When we say leadership, do we really mean management or administration? Or are we referring to an individual as a leader, manager, or administrator, boss? Or is our meaning more towards a mentor, guide, or counselor? Or are we referring more specifically to the actions of leaders, which we loosely define as leading, whether it be for good or ill? Perhaps the only way to avoid the terminology trap is to examine the purpose of integral leadership, a purpose that naturally flows from the intersections of theory and practice. If you were to ask what is leadership, you would be asking a perfectly logical and yet nonsensical question. Logical because when we are asked to describe what leadership is and what it isn't, we almost immediately look to the individuals of our past who we thought of as a leader. From there, we begin to classify leadership as a set of behaviors, traits, and actions. Leadership, leader, and leading become inseparable. Leadership becomes personified and/or objectified. This is precisely how we defeat the further reaches of leadership. We demote it from its integral reality. With this reduced perception of leadership logically anchored within our consciousness, we begin to value the position and the actions more than the further reaches held by the integral veracity of the construct. The result of this logical response shows how we might innocently miss the real purpose of leadership from this integral perspective. Integral leadership is again unique among other forms and functions of leadership found within the wide domain of leadership studies. In many ways, integral leadership attempts to form a container in which other forms of leading and leadership might coexist. Integral leadership positions itself at the intersections and therefore seeks the ability to use multiple approaches, multiple lenses, and to fashion the theoretical aims of leadership studies towards the achievement of higher possibilities made possible along this upward way. Joseph Ross author of Leadership for the 21st Century, once stated that the nature of leadership studies will itself be transformed. What we might then consider as our pivotal purpose of integral leadership is that it is a transformative force within the field. By connecting and constructing amongst the relational aspects of theory and practice, integral leadership goes to work for the world at the potential of world of potential and possibilities. What is it? What is integral leadership? In my opinion, it is an ontology. Breaking this word down, we discover that ontos means being, or to be born, or real, or the nature of reality. I begin with this notion of ontology as a way to frame integral leadership because integral leadership leadership in this frame concerns itself first and foremost in the nature of reality. It concerns itself with what might already exist, but yet to be seen fully because it has yet to be treated integrally. The reality at play at the intersections of potential are how do we, as integral leadership scholars and practitioners, engage the good theories and good practices across multiple disciplines, cultures, and spiritualities towards creating exceptional communities of practice. This is our purpose. It reminds me of the quote, "The dissipating clouds do not create the moon, they simply reveal it." We are in the process of revealing the reality, the fuller reality of leadership studies. This approach would stand in direct opposition to articulating integral leadership as a truth or as some form of static approach. We do not wish to refer to integral leadership as some ultimate truth or something that is most beautiful for the field of leadership studies. To do so would only put us into a defensive posture and force us towards articulating a definition that will in the end confine our abilities to relate to all other good practices and good theories. We see ourselves as bridge builders, and all good theories and all good practices as planks for spanning the theoretical divides and for connecting and sharing good practices. What about theory and practice? When it comes to theory and practice, this integral space, this space where disciplines might intersect, we are constantly seeking ways in which to put these tested theories and best practices to work in the world. Yet, that surface intention alone is not enough to build a transdisciplinary perspective of leadership. We must also seek to reach into the depths of these theories and seek ways to put them into practice. Additionally, we must reflect at the heart of practice and seek ways in which these practices might begin to inform or to create theory. Theory and practice, therefore, form a continuum within this integral space. It is, as Leonardo da Vinci said, "He who loves practice without theory is like a sailor who boards a ship without a rudder and compass, and never knows where he might cast." Integral leadership, then, could be considered as a dynamic or as a flow around any organization or community. Said more plainly, around any human engagement in which leadership is tasked. I suspect there are multiple ways of illuminating the elements of that integral space. We could speak to it from an all-qual approach. We could simply look at it as the interactions of the subjective, intersubjective, interobjective, and objective purposes. Perhaps we might just simply use the words I, we, us, and ours. No matter how we position it, it might always begin with I, and how I value something of beauty, which inspires me to share with you, whereupon we discover collectively the reality of this beauty shared and seek measures to put it to work in our world for us, and thereby create a product from that value beauty found that makes our world better. Our flow around any community and organization could simply be I, we, us, and ours. And through it all, we must take care not to fall in love with our discoveries and thereby arrest our further research. We must be constantly awake to new stories and new ways of engaging this integral space. We must constantly be asking ourselves, what are we doing well and true today that may well be the source of our undoing tomorrow? We must pay attention to the stories that surround our world now and tomorrow. What does integral leadership purpose? This is the real question, and the one that places our purpose in action in the world. There are two important words that we must discuss as we begin to engage these purposes: leadership and integral. Leadership. In my studies into the art and science of leadership, I have come across over 200 different definitions of leadership. I suspect there are many more, depending upon the situation within the community or organization. Joseph Rost once complained that it seemed to be permissible for leadership scholars to not risk a definition of leadership. While I concur with his sentiment in the integral case, it may be worth discussing why defining leadership may be counterproductive. Let's consider the word integral. Looking at the definitions, we might come to see that the integral would mean something that is necessary to make complete, that the integral could mean forming a whole or something that is undivided. When we combine these two words, integral leadership, we are intentionally seeking leadership from that integral space. Within that space, we begin to understand that defining such a space unnecessarily results in confining its integral purpose. It is important at this stage that we begin to understand integral leadership as a creative space, a relational space, a spiritual space, a space where potentials meet and actualize. Therefore, we begin to see leadership, leading, and leader as elements of the space, of that space. They tend to work together in a very purposeful way. Leadership in this integral space might be considered something that is illuminating the interrelationships occurring within that space. And the leader within the space would be more about integral modeling than what might have been traditionally designated in past situations. Leading, therefore, results in potentiating integral actions. Integral leadership illuminates the interrelationships occurring within this intersectional space, this transdisciplinary space, thereby inviting the leader or potentiator to begin modeling how to engage or relate within this space in order to achieve our mutual collective purposes. And finally, leading then must become much more about integral actions than about some personal label of leader. Integral leadership is always seeking completeness and equilibrium. Therefore, empowering disciplines to connect cross-functionally can be a very transformative force for individuals and the communities of practice, leading to any number of outcomes, to include a growing spiritual awareness or perhaps something more in line with consciousness development. Integral leadership has no need to hide from the notions of spiritual or spirituality. It views spirituality as an integral part of development. There are spiritual ramifications operating within the integral space. As a result, the meta-theory surrounding integral leadership and integral development is connected to spirituality as well as the functional stages of development. Working from and within this integral space then requires a shifting of paradigms. It is important to note that we are not simply interacting with the subjective or with the objective. these constructs coexist within the integral space, the integral leader must become aware of and develop the skills to transactively engage across this dichotomy. To move transactively is to dissolve the polarity between the subjective and the objective. Transactivity typically concerns the revelation of something hidden rather than the correspondence between subjective thinking and feeling and objective truth and theory. At the Integral Leadership Review, we learn to move transactively. As a way of an illustration, consider application, research or theory, and personal growth transformation as three elements to be held within this integral space. It is possible to examine each of these from a separate perspective. We can look at the pragmatics of application, and we can begin to form an understanding of those practicalities. We can embrace theory given to us by objective science, and we can embrace the notion of personal growth and transformation. So at any one time, we have the practical elements of pragmatism setting unconnected to objective theory, setting unconnected to subjective natures of personal growth and development. Each of these areas offers something to the nature of leadership. What integral leadership does is begin to build the bridges and begin to span the distance between the practical and theoretical and personal. How do we locate the field of integral leadership? Well, integral leadership is about good theory, relating to good practices, embracing exceptional human development at the intersections of potential, amplified by the way of transdisciplinary, transcultural, and trans-spiritual approaches. What does, or should, leadership purpose under the best conditions with the highest intentions? This is the integral question. We want to explore from this integral space just what the best conditions are now and in the future, as it is doubtful that they will ever be static. We want to understand what the highest intentions of leadership studies now and in the future. It is not necessary for us to define, to refine, to confine the nature of leadership. To do so is an act of violence against its nature. We want to illuminate, build understanding and bridges to span the discipline, to create a transdisciplinary approach towards solving the real problems facing our world now and in the future. While this may not be the full answer, it is a place to begin. Integral Leadership Review, therefore, seeks to make substantial differences in creating self-sustaining, generative people, systems, and Earth through an integrative, developmental, and transdisciplinary approach to leadership. Thank you.